step.
So thank you for the introduction. Oh my. Okay. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the introduction. My apologies again if this cuts out by any means. We have very sparse internet here and connection. So I'm Stephanie Stronzik, president and founder of Pennsylvania Bat Rescue. And I've been working with bats for about 16 years now, and I am licensed through the Pennsylvania Game Commission as a wildlife rehabilitator, but my title far past that. I basically encompass everything about bats from their natural history, field work, and into our wildlife rehab clinic, because it's all synonymous at the end of the day. So Pennsylvania Bat Rescue, let me see if I can get this. I think I had a problem here last time, but I don't, hopefully it doesn't, there we go. The natural history of bats is they are the only flying mammals in the world. They have wings and have really small finger bones. They are not like flying squirrels. Flying squirrels glide. They don't truly have powered flight. Bats are also interesting in the fact that they are exceptionally long-lived for their size. So they can live quite a long life. Some bats here in Pennsylvania, like the big brown bat that you will meet tonight, they can live up to 25 years. And that's quite an exceptionally long life compared to rodents. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but bats actually are not in the rodent family. They are also really slow reproducing for their size. So most bat species, especially here in Pennsylvania, give birth to one baby a year, and that's in the summertime. And they utilize all of their energy to raising that baby to survive to adulthood. Because bats are incredibly unique, they use all of that energy to help their pups survive to adulthood. And they do form a specialized niche. One of the reasons we have the keystone symbol in our logo isn't just because we are the keystone state, but also because bats are a keystone species. And without them, a lot of things kind of become out of alignment, and they are really important for our environment. And you'll learn why. Bats have been around for a really, really long time. They've been around for around 52.5 million years. And most animals during that period became extinct. Around 75% of them have become extinct. But bats are one of the few, because they're so small and they have various evolutionaries to survive. They were able to survive such a very long time. And so this fossil is from around 52.5 million years ago. This particular bat was found, this fossil bat was found in Wyoming. And this skeletal structure is very similar to what we see today, with the exception of there, you can see those tiny bones where the wings are. And at the end of each one of those projections, which is their finger bones, there's a little claw. So our bats today don't have that claw. That has been an adaptation that kind of helped with it previously. They were more of a ground dwelling species versus mostly flying. And now they do have a thumbnail, but they don't have those little nails at the end of each finger. So there are two types of bats throughout the world. They're called the megabats, which are your giant flying foxes on the left, and those are your fruit bats, and then the microbats on the right. In the United States, we have microbats, and most of our species in the United States are insect eating only. And so bats form an order all on their own. Nobody else is in this order, and it's called Chiroptera, and it translates to hand wing. And bats' wings are very similar to the human arm. They have the same bones, they have the same tendons and the same muscles. It's just a different structure, and their finger bones are elongated as opposed to ours. They are not hollow bone like birds, so they have a different capability of flying. And over 1,400 species are worldwide. These little pilots are eastern red bats. They are native to Pennsylvania, and these are actually babies that we raised this year. Insectivorous bats make up the majority of bat species worldwide, and as noted, they do eat insects. Our bat species here in Pennsylvania can eat up to 1,000 mosquito-sized insects in about an hour. several thousand within a night. So when they are out consuming bugs, they usually rise late in the evening and they forage for insects. They eat as much as they can. And then they go and they have a particular roosting spot where they will go and rest and digest their insects. And then they'll go out and forage again. There are fruit-eating bats. We don't have them here, but these bats are really interesting, and I didn't show here, but the insect-eating bats have really big ears and really small eyes. Now, they are not blind. They can see in a gray scale, but their ears are what is really important for them to kind of navigate the world, as opposed to the frugivores that have really small ears and really big eyes. And this is because they do see in color and they need those nice big eyeballs to see their fruit. They do eat ripened fruit, so they tend to eat fruit that is overly ripe and not capable of being consumed or shipped for consumption around the world. So this is a gray-headed flying fox up top. They are having some issues in Australia. This is a species in severe decline because the orchard farmers are frustrated because the flying foxes do eat their fruit, but again, they eat the overly ripe fruit that is just not going to survive being shipped across the world. So a lot of netting is used, and Australia is kind of having a little situation with the gray-headed flying foxes. Nectivores, we do have two species in the United States. They're in the southwest portions of the United States, and these are bats that consume nectar, a high energy source for them, and they do consume it continuously because it's not as nutritious as you would think. It does have a lot of sugars, but the agaves lack a lot of sugar substance, and we'll get into that in a little bit. There are carnivore bats. These are bats that eat frogs. The bottom right is a bat that is hunting a frog. And these bats you would think would be small, but there's a picture of the top here of Dr. Merlin Tuttle, which is basically the bat grandfather, and he's handling one of these carnivorous bats, and you can see that they're quite large, and so they do have the capabilities of catching small frogs, small amphibians. There are piscivores. We don't have them, but there are piscivore species, and these bats are really, really neat. They have giant feet that skim the surface of the water and catch those little minnows. And the bottom right picture, you can see a little minnow in his foot. And so this bat species does have echolocation abilities that can penetrate the surface of the water, and they're capable of recognizing when the small fish or minnow is at the surface of the water, and so they are able to recognize it and capture it. And out of 1,400 species of bats, people tend to be afraid of bats because of the vampire bats. So again, more than 1,400 species. There is no definite number because we're discovering bat species every year. And so out of the 1,400 plus bat species, 3 of them are vampire bats, and they're pictured here. And they're about 3 inches long. And these are bats that do consume blood, and they are in the South American region, Latin America, and they are quite small. So they only consume about a tablespoon of blood a night. But one of the interesting things about this species, and I think it's really important to kind of illustrate that, is even though they are a blood drinking species, they have 2 really important properties in their saliva. One is an anesthetic, so at least they're kind enough to numb the area where they're about to make a small little nick. And then the other is an anticoagulant protein in their saliva. And this anticoagulant protein has helped with synthesizing heart medications. So anybody who has to take an anticoagulant heart medication, especially anyone that has had to deal with stroke or heart attack, this medication has been synthesized because of the protein property in vampire bats. Here in Pennsylvania, we have 9 species of bat. Technically, we have 11 that kind of hang out. 2 of them are not considered native, but since There has been a little bit of a shift of climate. The southern species are starting to make their way further north. And so these are all eastern red bats, with the exception of the one in the middle, which is called a Seminole bat. And Seminole bats are a southern species. They are not endemic to Pennsylvania, but we have been seeing them more so over the recent years. And these are a foliage roosting species. They will inhabit deciduous trees, mostly maple and oak. And I think it's really important to point out, I think I'm talking to a group that is probably going to do this anyway, but as it becomes more autumn-like and the leaves start falling, just leave them be. The fallen leaves serve as a purpose for a lot of different things, not just insects and amphibians, but also for bats, especially the eastern red bat. This bat is a tolerant species that will roost in a tree and hang by 1 foot. And then when it gets too cold, around 35 to 40 degrees at night, they let go of their branch and they kind of glide to the forest floor. Or if it's in your yard, they'll glide to the ground and they hide under the leaves, and those leaves protect them from the elements, and they also create a nice insulation buffer for these bats to keep them nice and warm. Even though they're cold tolerant, they cannot freeze. So they keep their body temperature through thermal regulation. They keep their body temperature above 32, but the leaves help protect and keep them warm. The bat on the left is a silver-haired bat, and this bat is the Sean Connery of bats, and they love shagbark hickories. They roost behind loose bark, and they will also roost in abandoned woodpecker holes. And the bat on the right is a horay bat, and these bats, they are all solitary. The eastern red bat and the silver-haired bat, and the horay is also a solitary species. These bats kind of own the sky. They are much larger than any other species that we have here in PA. By much larger, I mean they're about 6 or 7 inches long. They do have a 14-inch wingspan, and they roost 20 to 40 feet up in conifers. So your white pines, your spruces, they are a coniferous roosting species. And so if you buy for Christmas, be aware that you might have a bat in your tree, so just be careful. This species is cold tolerant. They sometimes migrate, and although their migration, their hibernation patterns, and their winter behaviors are not really well known with this species, we thought they migrate, but they actually can hibernate as well because they are cold tolerant. They have a really fluffy, thick furred tail. They also have fur on their wings. And so they use their tail as like a blanket. So we call this in the rehab world a butt blanket. And they use this to keep warm. And they also can fly at very high altitudes, up to 8,000 feet. So they do fly in very cold temperatures, and they're able to do so because their fur is so thick, and they have fur in various parts of their body, not just their body and their tail, but their wings as well. And then, of course, we have the crevice-dwelling bats. These are usually bats that are brownish in color or darker in color, and these guys will hide in crevices, barns and attics for sure for this species. This is a big brown bat, and other species are not urban dwelling necessarily. Big browns are very tolerant of human activities. Other species, known as the Myotis family, they are not very tolerant of human activities. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But how do bats see at night? So bats don't use glasses. They see with sound. They emit a high frequency sound that bounces off of everything in their environment. And it kind of gives them a real-time picture of their environment. Not only can they see, but they have this built-in adaptation of echolocation because they fly quite fast, maneuvering in the dark and trying to avoid colliding with branches and other objects while hunting really small insects. So it's really a fine-tuned adaptation that they have. And this is a bridge in Austin, Texas. These are the expansion joints Austin, Texas is home to the largest urban concentration of bats in the world. Between Austin and the Bracken Cave, which is a little bit further away from Austin, they form the largest concentration of bats in the world. Congress Avenue Bridge in particular has 1.5 million bats. A long time ago, Dr. Merlin Tuttle got word that Austin wanted to destroy this bridge because they were afraid of rabies. So he relocated and convinced the city not to destroy the bridge, helping to protect the bats in the bridge. And other bridges in Austin also have bats. And over $1 million is drawn every year from tourism, just because people come to Austin from around the world to see this magnificent emergence of Mexican free-tailed bats. And there's a little bit of an image of Bracken Cave. Bracken Cave is home to 30 million bats, which is, again, a really large concentration. That's the highest concentration of bats in the world. But these bats inhabit a cave versus the 1.5 million that inhabit an urban setting. So our mission at Pennsylvania Bat Rescue is conservation, education, and rehabilitation. I am very strict on conservation and education. I think it's something that we really need to focus on if we're going to continue to rehabilitate these animals. It starts with you guys. It starts with our audience. It starts with supporters. It starts with people who care about animals, because without people caring, we would not be doing what we do today. And of course, conservation plays a huge role in that, because you'll note, I'll be talking about in a little bit about white nose syndrome, but conserving our bat species for future generations. So rehabilitation requires a professionalism of, basically, we are a bat hospital. And so we provide professional treatment and care of sick, injured, and orphaned bats. And our ultimate goal is to release them back into the wild, into their natural habitat. And that's where conservation comes in. When we spend a lot of time and a lot of energy helping to get these bats healthy enough to be released back into the wild, we want to make sure that their habitat can help them survive and is conducive to their needs. So what do? We do a lot of different things. Of course, we do wildlife rehabilitation, but we also help with our state agencies in collecting essential data on our surviving bat species from white nose syndrome. We are learning about behaviors and different things that the biologists may not know a lot about. We spend every single day with these animals, and we pick up on behaviors that have not been recognized out in the wild. This is one of my favorite stories. This is a bat from Nakamixon. Of course, I'm so clever and named her Mixon. She is a big brown bat, and she was found, this is not the best photo, but she was found behind one of the bat houses, and they went to take down the bat house to clean the inside of the guano and the urine. And it was cold, it was in the fall, and they assume, bats should be gone by then. They should be migrating to their hibernation site. But she stuck around, and she accidentally fell. And when she fell, I was expecting her to have fractured wings, but she was perfectly healthy otherwise, except her canine teeth. You can kind of see it in the photo. They are misaligned. And what happened was she had a dislocated fracture, which you can see on the left. It's a little bit fuzzy, but it was really hard to determine what to do. So we utilized our veterinarian, who did an amazing procedure, and he made a small incision right near her jaw. Now, this is a 3 to 4 inch long bat, so not very big. And he made a small incision near her jaw, and he realigned her jaw and sutured it. And over the next 6 weeks, she was able to heal, and she fully recovered. She was able to echolocate and forage. So Mixon got released back out into the wild. And I feel like that is a wholesome story that facilitates what we do in the rehab setting. We do get glue trap bats. We do ask that people that find glue trap animals, please don't Google how to take them off. Bats having really small finger bones, you can easily fracture those finger bones. And we do use a variety of ways that we take bats off different adhesives. It's not a one thing fits everything kind of situation. So we use different adhesive removers. And we also stabilize that animal. Usually animals that are stuck to a glue trap are dehydrated and emaciated and need several days of critical care before they can get released back out into the wild. Ultimately, just don't use glue traps. We do get cat-caught bats. We do ask, and I know I'm talking to a bird group, but we do ask that people keep cats indoors. Cats are great at hunting. They don't know what natural issues lie ahead of them. So cats often get hit by cars or they get parasites, and it's not a very healthy way for them to live, as well as our natural wildlife. Bats don't know what a cat is. They don't know how to avoid them, especially the juveniles. And usually once we get a bat that is cat caught, it's very unlikely that they survive, whether it be injury or the bacteria associated with cats and dogs in their mouth. That is a very challenging bacteria to recover from. We do get bats with broken arms. They are flying animals, so of course they're not the most graceful at flying. And this is actually one of our education bats today. I'm not sure if you're going to see her today, but her name is the Duchess. And you can see that she's wrapped up in a little burrito up top, which she absolutely hated. But she came in as a juvenile and she fractured that bone on the bottom left is her humerus, right near her shoulder blade. And we worked very closely with our veterinarian and they were able to pin her wing. But the Duchess, being a young bat and eager to try to get out of their her wrap, she maneuvered her wing in such a way that it healed incorrectly. So she doesn't have flight capability, but she is completely happy just hanging out in her pine. So she is an education bat of ours. And we can't give any credit to rehabilitation without noticing our veterinarians. We work really closely with several veterinary clinics, and they help us to help the bats. They help form new protocols, change some of the existing protocols, and help diagnose and treat new injury and illnesses. And of course, you can't be a wildlife rehabber without having baby season a part of what you do every year. So every year we raise quite a few baby bats, and they're more challenging than a lot of other species because they, from the time that they're born until they're a juvenile, which is usually around 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the species, they are 24/7 care around the clock, doesn't matter. Mama bat has a tough life because they are born weighing a third of mom's body weight, with size, very large feet, as you can see in the middle image a little bit, and full-grown thumbs. This is to cling on to mom for the first week of life. And so baby season here in Pennsylvania typically starts in early to mid-June and lasts until early August to mid-August. It's been a little bit different these last few years. We've noticed that our baby season is being pushed back a little bit. But July is typically the busiest month of the year for us. And so we are raising baby bats, and we do feed them every 2 hours around the clock, a specialized milk formula. We don't use milk formula that's readily available. It's actually a recipe that we use because they're so specialized and they grow so exceptionally fast that we have to use a very particular formula. And of course, baby bats, they're just so cute. This is I believe this is a Virginia big-eared bat. And they never really grow into those ears. They're so cute. They don't live here in Pennsylvania, but I had to show this image because they're just adorable. This is a fruit bat. You can see those large feet. So again, they have full-grown feet when they're born. They almost look a little strange. Full-grown feet, full-grown thumbs, and the whole purpose of that is to cling on to their mom. And mom, again, has a really tough life. Even though she only has one baby clinging to her, she's flying the night sky. She's avoiding colliding with objects, and she's eating enough insects for not only her, but for the milk production of her baby. Every year we get people who try to raise baby bats, even though they are super cute. Please don't try to raise any baby wildlife. Bats being exceptionally unique and growing very quickly, they require a lot of calcium and protein in their diet with a specialized recipe. And we also give them a lot of supplements. This is one of the bats. It was an education bat that we had in California. He developed metabolic bone disease because somebody was trying to raise him on cow milk. Cows and kittens and dogs grow much more slowly than bats do. And so this bat was not able to be released. And you can see those inflammation near the joints there. That is metabolic bone disease. So with 1,400 species of anything, you're going to have bats with funny faces. This is a horseshoe nose bat, and I think this is a good representation of the diversity of this group of animals. Their ears are so unique, and their nose is also quite unique. Biologists believe that they emit their echolocation through their nose instead of their mouth, and it bounces back into their giant satellite ears, helping them to understand the environment that they're in. And this bat is a bulldog bat, and I just love them because they look like a bulldog. Some species really resemble foxes and canines and things like that. And again, these are two different species of horseshoe nose bats, very unique. I love this bat. This is a wrinkle-faced bat. They're so ugly, they're cute. Very interesting species in South America. And this is a bat species who has an interesting hairdo. Biologists believe that that hairdo is strictly for wooing the ladies, and it serves no other purpose. And of course, your fruit-eating bats. Fruit-eating bats are responsible for seed dispersal of 99% of the rainforest. They are exceptionally messy eaters. They chew their fruit and they suck the juices out of it and then spit the pulp and the seeds out, and in turn germinate a tree. And of course, you can't mention bats without mentioning agave pollination. Bats are one of the primary pollinators of the agave plant. They're not the only pollinator, but they are one of many pollinating species. And so the pollinating, I believe this is a Mexican long-tongue bat, has a tongue that is 2/3 its body length to get a drink from the bottom of that flower where the nectar is, and in turn is pollinated by the agave. So by the end of the night, this bat that is normally brown turns all yellow from the pollination. And some residents in Arizona couldn't understand why their hummingbird feeders were going down every night. And so they set up hidden cameras. I believe this was about a decade and a half ago, and captured some of the nectar feeding bats getting a drink. Unfortunately, we have to talk about white nose syndrome. It is a very devastating disease throughout North America and Canada. Particularly Pennsylvania was one of the hardest hit states. We have a lot of caves and mines in this state, and a lot of bats migrate to Pennsylvania to hibernate and spend the winter months here. So white nose syndrome affects little browns, big browns, tricolored bats, Indiana, small-footed, silver hair, and northern long-eared bats. That is a lot. That is more than half of the species here in Pennsylvania are affected by white nose syndrome. So white nose syndrome is a cold thriving fungus. It gets its name because it infects the exposed portions of the bat, particularly the muzzle, ears, and the wings. And it has killed 6 to 7 million bats since it was first discovered in a cave in upstate New York in 2006. And so it is a race to save our bats. The tricolored bat recently, which is native to Pennsylvania, was proposed by the US Fish and Wildlife to be considered listed on the endangered species list. That is also this is the second bat in the year, the northern long-eared bat being the first to be proposed for listing, and will likely be listed by the end of the year. So between our state biologists, laboratories, and rehabilitators, We are all desperately trying to save these bats. If you see a bat in the winter months, please call us or call your local wildlife rehabilitator. If you're in Lehigh County, Berks, Bucks, it's likely us. Bats that come out in the winter are bats that are not okay. And whether it be a warm day and they just got woken up because it was unseasonably warm, or if they are suffering from white nose syndrome. Winter has become one of the busiest months for us besides summer. The winter months have become busier for us sometimes, more so than summer. Summer, we have around 30 to 40 baby bats that we're raising. But in the winter, we get the most amount, physically, the most amount of bats throughout the year. So bats in the winter are usually juveniles or older bats, and sometimes they are suffering from white nose syndrome. And so this is what white nose syndrome looks like. It is a saprophytic fungus, meaning it destroys living tissue, and it creates these lesions and holes in the bat's wing. Now, when they're sleeping and they're hibernating, bats lower their respiration, their heart rate, their immune system also slows down. Every physiological process of a bat slows down when they're in hibernation. It's an evolutionary adaptation to survive winter months when there's no food availability, that being the insects, and there's no water for them to drink. This fungus kind of irritates them in the first initial stages of infection, but as it progresses, it awakens the bat almost nearly 30% more than it would if they were just naturally hibernating. In some cases, the bats wake up 2 to 3 times more than they normally would, depending on the species and location and severity of disease. Under UV light, the fungus is iridescent. It creates this yellow-green color to the wings that results in infection, that shows infectious tissue. And that's because the fungus is actually absorbing iron from the blood and iridescently showing that it's a yellowish green color. And this is only illustrated during certain times of infection. So here at the rehab, we work very, very closely with the Pennsylvania Game Commission to help bats that are suffering from white nose syndrome. And we, in 2000, I don't even know what year it is anymore, but in 2018, I created a captive treatment protocol to help with white nose syndrome. In 2017, we received a group of little browns, and unfortunately, we tried every protocol that was ever published by a rehabilitator, and none of them worked. So I ended up losing a lot of bats. It was quite devastating. And in turn, I developed my own captive treatment protocol, which has successfully aided in the recovery and release of many little brown bats here in Pennsylvania. And so this is the occurrence map of white nose syndrome. Colorado is recently listed, so that is not shown here, but all the colored areas are sites of suspected or confirmed infection, Pennsylvania being a very colorful state. Again, we have a lot of caves and mines here. So we are in the months of September, approaching October, and what is going on right now is bats are mating. Believe it or not, bats are very interesting. They don't mate in the spring, they mate in the fall. And what's really interesting about females is they have delayed fertilization, which means they store the sperm until the spring when the egg is fertilized. So they mate in September and October. So they're also migrating as well and mating. And then they go to sleep between November and March, sometimes April, since April tends to be a little bit cooler than we normally would see a few decades ago. And bats are sleeping for quite some time. During the fall months, it is appropriate to humanely remove bats. We do have a list of humane wildlife removal companies that we recommend for bats during this time of the year. In winter and summer, bats are not allowed to be disturbed. Winter being a very particularly hard time for bats because of white nose syndrome, and also because of the fact that if you remove a bat and put it outside in the middle of winter, it's going to freeze or it's going to starve to death and deplete its fat reserves. And of course, summer, you can't remove bats because it's baby season. So again, it's migration and hibernation time. All of these bats are juveniles, and they are all our state endangered northern long-eared bat. Northern long-eared bats have been particularly hard hit by white nose syndrome. And for whatever reason, during migration, the juveniles that were born this past summer have a hard time migrating. And so they tend to run out of energy, or they run out of food, or they're not very good at hunting, and they end up on the sides of buildings. This is not a bat that is diseased. This is a bat that is starving or dehydrated and needs to come into care. So please give us a call. Again, these are northern long-eared bats. They're so small, but they hide in the most places, and I'm not entirely sure why. Nobody really knows why they do this, but they are all in need of help. So you can't mention bats without talking about rabies. Rabies is a neurological disease that affects the central nervous system. And it's really easy to protect yourself from rabies when it comes to bats. Just wearing thick leather gloves and using a cloth to pick them up is a lot of protection for you and for that animal. And so if you use that step, just wearing thick gloves and handling with a small thick towel, you will in turn save yourself and save the bat. Because if somebody handles a bat barehanded, we are required to euthanize and test for rabies, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of rehabilitating and rescuing bats. Raccoons having the highest incidence of rabies in PA. They are really cute, but please don't handle the trash pandas. Any rabies vector species, any wildlife, you don't handle barehanded. There are diseases that we can get from them and give to them. If you found a bat, what do? And so you can contact a licensed wildlife rehabilitator on the Pennsylvania Association of Wildlife Rehabilitators, PAWR.com. And there's a little illustration to kind of show what you can do if a bat is roosting and you found a bat. You can put a box over it and slide a piece of paper underneath of it. But if the bat is not on a smooth surface or is on the ground, again, you can wear thick leather gloves, use a small thick towel or a small towel and gently put it into a secure container. They will make noises. Bats are really small and they are being defensive. And a bat that makes noise is not a bat that has rabies. It doesn't say that it does or it doesn't, but they are very defensive because they are so small. And so, of course, they're going to try to make themselves look big and scary because you are a giant human and you are very scary to them. So always wear thick gloves and contact a rehabilitator. That being said, also make sure that that container has a secure lid. If you're driving the bat to a wildlife rehabilitator and there's no lid and the bat gets out in your car, that is a really big problem. So please make sure it's secure. Another thing that we can do for bats is plant native. Bats eating native insects and occasionally eating stink bugs and Japanese beetles, but they predominantly eat native insects, and those native insects require native plants. So if you want to attract bats, one of the best ways to attract bats is by planting a native garden. And you also, in turn, attract birds. So Edge of the Woods is a great native plant company, I guess you could say, right outside of Schnecksville. And you can also visit Plant Native. This is a link that Doug Talamy provides. And it shows you based on where you live, what plants you should plant in your backyard that are native. And this is a really, really good indication. This happened last year, and unfortunately, this poor little bat did not make it. But this is non-native burdock, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but there is a bat in the bottom right-hand corner. This is a juvenile eastern red bat, and she was stuck to the burdock, and she could not get free. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. But this is one indication of how non-native species affect our native wildlife. And if you really want to help bats as well, you can build bat houses. We do have a link on our website for building bat houses. Remember, humane exclusion and relocation. It is illegal to kill colonies of bats here in Pennsylvania. And just learning to coexist with bats. They are not here to harm us. They are our night protectors, and they are here helping us in many different ways by providing natural insect control, especially in agricultural areas. They eat, especially the big browns, they eat a numerous amount of corn earworm moths that affect, of course, corn. And hoary bats in particular like to roost in conifers that are edge woods adjacent to agricultural areas. And building bat houses should be placed 10 to 15 feet up. This is for several reasons. One is making sure that they avoid predation. So raccoons are bats, so are snakes. During the day, it's birds that are, it is birds that are native predators to bats. Songbirds that can see bats, especially our foliage roosting bats, will harass them, the robins and the blue jays in particular. And then, of course, the birds of prey are natural predators to the bats as well, especially screech owls, occasionally barred owls, and red-tailed hawks. These are some links or organizations that are great for purchasing bat houses. Please don't buy bat houses from Lowe's or Home Depot. They're not very well made. Pennsylvania Game Commission has an incredible amount of information on bat houses and bat plans. Bat Conservation and Management, which is based in Pennsylvania, also has a lot of great information. There's Bat B&B and Bat Conservation International. And then, of course, our bats do us a huge service by eating a lot of insects, including mosquitoes. So next time you're enjoying the evening and you don't have any mosquitoes eating you alive, thank a bat. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We do post a lot of images and videos illustrating the unique features of the bats that we receive. And I am going to stop share this so you can see. It'll take me a few minutes, but we will present our education bats.
Absolutely fascinating to learn all this stuff.
I agree with you 100%.
All right, so we are going to, we specifically didn't feed certain bats so that you guys could see them. The first being, his name is Gizmo. He's a silver-haired bat. If you've been following us, Gizmo was attacked by what I think it was a robin, but of course I don't know. It was some species of bird, and he sustained a head injury, so much so that he has neurological damage. And so when he eats, he puts his ears down to the side, which is not typically a normal behavior of silver-haired bat. So you might be able to see him. Can you guys see him?
Yeah, can you share your screen?
Oh, yeah, that would help, right?
Well, I'm not sure she can because she's not running a presentation. I think what individuals need to do is go to their view tab and put it on speaker view, and then the speaker's screen becomes what you're seeing instead of the matrix of everybody.
So Stephanie, say something.
Hi.
So
trying
That
once,
worked.
Did it work?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Can you see? Are you able to see him?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So this is Gizmo, and he is our silver hair bat. He had a little bit of head trauma from a songbird, and he was probably roosting where a bird saw him and started harassing him, because birds, just like bats, are territorial. And so occasionally they will cross paths. And so his ears go down to the side. That is not a normal behavior of these guys. So we named him Gizmo. Can you see him eating dinner?
yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on Gizmo? This is a species that does inhabit deciduous, particularly shagbark hickory species. And you can really see that based on the camouflage coloration of his silver tipped fur.
What is he eating?
He's eating a mealworm. So we gut load mealworms in captivity for the bats. So we give the mealworms a special diet and supplements for the bats. So that's what he's eating. It's quite tasty to him. Does anyone have any questions on him?
Well, every time somebody talks, we lose you.
Oh no.
We
Can you
lose
hear me?
when people, if you're on speaker view, people who talk then obliterate your picture.
Well, just pose the questions quickly and then go to mute.
Or put the question in the chat box.
All right, I think we are going to get the next baddie. He's gonna finish dinner real quick. Do you have any questions while we're getting the next one?
How many of the mealworms will
How
he
many
eat?
of
Okay, so he, I'm assuming that's what the question was, how many mealworms can he eat? He will eat probably around 20 mealworms. We keep him on a specialized diet because we do take him for education programs. And so he will eat a lot of mealworms and get really fat. So he's actually on a diet. That's a good question.
Are the mealworms have more fat in them than like mosquitoes or whatever else he would be eating?
Yeah, so they are a little bit more they're more nutritious than some other varieties of captive food. But out in the wild, mosquitoes are consumed by predominantly juveniles because they're so easy to capture. Mosquitoes are they're dumb. They just kind of hang out. They don't really move a whole lot. They don't try to avoid predation. And it's a great way for the bats to learn how to naturally hunt. So juveniles are the ones that in particularly utilize mosquitoes the most. And so this is Coco, and Coco is a big brown bat, which is the most common crevice roosting bat in Pennsylvania. And he was cat caught. So he sustained a lot of trauma to his wings. And so he is not releasable, unfortunately. And so he will remain in captivity here with us. And he's a little bit camera shy. So I don't, it's kind of cold too. So we do keep the bats at a more ambient temperature to the outside because we're trying to facilitate their natural habitat. Oh, there he goes. He woke up. So this is a species that inhabits barns, attics, and makes up around 90% of our intake, our big browns. We call them the bed and breakfast bats because they're quite lazy. Do you guys have any questions on them?
Somebody had asked in the chat room, how many times a day do they eat?
Oh, that's a good question. So they only eat once a day. When they're babies, we of course feed them around the clock, every 2 to 3 hours. But as adults, they get fed once a day and they get fed in the evening.
How
Any other-
many bats are you dealing with now that you would have to feed them all in the evening?
That's a good question too. So we have around 40 bats right now, which is the lowest we've had so far this year. We started our spring releases with 160 bats, and then so far, I believe we took in, I forget what number we're at. It's been very busy. I think it's around 248 bats so far this year. So we are the largest bat rehab center in the Northeast. We usually take in around 280 to 300 bats a year. But we don't hand feed every single one. So the bats, when they're in care, they learn to eat mealworms out of a dish. And when they get released back into the wild, they don't have a hard time acclimating. They don't have a hard time acclimating to eating wild insects.
So how do you get your funding and how can people help you?
That's good. I'm never good at selling, like funding us. We are a federal nonprofit, and so we rely solely on donations. We don't get grants or anything from the government or state agencies. So everything that we do is funded through generous donations and programs that we offer. That is a really good question. I never sell myself. I really should.
None of the rehabbers that we deal with do, and I would encourage everybody on this call or this meeting to consider donating to the various animal rehabbers we have, because they're all selfless and taking it out of their own pockets most of the time to help us save our wildlife.
And I can say to everybody that if they went to the website for PA Bat Rescue, there is information on there about how you can donate.
We will be launching our October shop. So we have a shop on our website. It is not open all year long. We don't keep products on there all year long, but we will be launching some new things for the month of October, which is Bat Appreciation Month. And so October being one of the more busier seasons, we are hoping to generate a lot of funds to help with the expansion and renovation of our current space. Being that we took in 240 some bats already this year, we are learning that we are running out of room. The demand to help bats is quite high, especially during these challenging times when we have to deal with drought or severe storms or temperature change. Drastic temperature change throws the animals off quite a bit, even though they're native. When it fluctuates drastically, the animals are the ones that have to deal with it the most, of course. So we usually get phone calls, and we want to be able to help these animals. So we really desperately need to create more space. And so we will be launching some new products, but also just donating to us and attending bat programs. We do bat releases in the spring and summer. So the general public can come out, meet our education bats in person, and also see us release our healthy bats back out into the wild. I'm gonna grab
You're just giving them water now?
Yes. I grabbed a different bat. I'm going to That's okay. You can. So this is Loki, and Loki is a horay bat. And you can see similar coloration to the silver hair bat, but he's much larger than the other species. And he's one of our baby bats that we raised this past year. He's quite hungry, so I don't know. Let me see if I can hold him. There you go. Can you see him?
A little too close for focus.
Oh, how about that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Very interesting hair color.
He's very fluffy. And this is the species that is quite cold tolerant. And now that I'm talking, his ears are like, I don't really feel comfortable eating because you're too loud. But this is one of the tree roosting species, and he is healthy. We don't know if he can fly. He did fly pretty well, but he had a urinary tract infection. That's why he was in here. So you can see his beautiful wing, and that tan part over time will develop fur. He's still quite young. You can see the fingers. Very beautiful species.
Is that what was pictured in the photo that you sent with the talk announcement?
Yeah, so it was a horay species. I think the one in the photo was our education horay, the Countess. This is Loki. Hopefully he'll be released next year. He's probably, if he's releasable, he'll be released next year. Horays are a little bit more challenging because they roost very high up in trees. And generally when we get horay bats in care, they have sustained some type of injury, and almost all the time it's irreparable, or in a sense that they won't be able to be released. Usually they end up spending the rest of their lives with us. So we're hoping that we will be able to release him. And then we have another one as well that hopefully will be released. But they're just such a magnificent species. And let me see if he'll let me take his tail out without annoying him so much. You can see that beautiful furred tail. That's his little butt blanket. And that fur keeps him nice and warm, especially on nights like tonight. This is a species that, like I said, is cold tolerant, but ironically does not like the heat. So when it is really hot, they are not happy with high temperatures. And conifers, a nice grove of conifers is quite cool compared to deciduous. Conifers provide a lot of shade for these bats. And the Countess, the one that was in that picture, she came into care because somebody was cutting down all of their pine trees in the middle of summer. And I presume that her family was in that tree, and she was too young to fly. So instead of being able to fly off with the sound and the vibrations of the trees coming down, instead she fell quite a distance and sustained some head trauma. So do you have any questions for me?
For that last one, Stephanie, that wasn't Tower Road, was it?
I know that the trees were cut down near Bartow.
Wrong area. Okay. I just
Yeah.
heard some evergreens, some big ones that were cut down this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, my neighbors cut down 2 huge white pines in the middle of the summer, which really upset me because I'm sure there were some birds nesting up there and roosting and whatever. It's really
Yeah,
unfortunate.
the pine trees, the white pines in particular, I know are just such a great species for several bird, bat, frog, everything. And they're quite a hardy species as well. I don't know, can you hear him chewing? He's so loud.
I wish somebody would educate the tree removal people to not do that in the summer.
Yeah, I actually did see quite a few wildlife rehab centers got birds and squirrels because people were removing trees and didn't realize that there were families in there.
So if we wanted to install a bat house on our homes, I thought second floor was about where it was supposed to be. Is it, but is 15 feet the max? Should really be limited to 10 to 15 feet?
It can be higher, but no lower than 10 feet because the bats do have to emerge from the bat houses. And unlike birds, which I didn't mention this, but unlike birds, bats can't fly up off the ground. There are some species that can, but usually a bat that is found on the ground is likely injured or can be stranded because its body weight, especially larger species like this horay, they just can't get up off the ground. They're such a heavy bodied animal. So bat houses do really need to be at least 10 feet up. If you have a chimney and it gets 8 to 10 hours of direct sunlight, chimneys are a great place to mount bat houses because when you're not using the chimney in the summer, that's when the bats will be inhabiting it. And in the winter, when you will be using it, the bats will be gone because they will have migrated to their hibernation site. Bats, we do have migratory species here that go further south for the winter, your eastern reds, silver hairs, seminoles, occasionally the horays. But a lot of the crevice species, they also migrate. They can migrate out of state. They will. Some of them will migrate out of state, but the ones that stay here do migrate to caves and mines for the winter. And those caves and mines are generally around 52 to 55 degrees all year round, which is why it's such a great habitat for the white nose syndrome fungus. It's a consistent temperature, it's a consistent humidity, and it's great for the fungus to survive. Any other questions?
Yeah, Steph, there were two questions that were written in chat. One was, when is the best time to take down trees? And the other, a person wanted to know, how do you hibernate the bats at your center?
Those are two good questions. So the trees is a little more challenging. I would presume that you would be dealing with squirrels and birds as well as bats. So I would probably remove trees in the fall when there aren't nesting birds or nesting squirrels. Squirrel season tends to be a lot longer, and squirrels do give birth to multiple litters a year, usually 2 to 3, depending on the depending on the temperature. But I would presume that fall is the best time to remove those trees. And what was the second one? Sorry.
Somebody had asked, how do you hibernate the bats that you're taking care of?
Okay, so we actually just let the rehab portions of the rehab room get cold. One of the things that we're doing with our renovation project is dedicating a space to hibernate our bats. So we just allow the temperature to drop, but not below 50 degrees. So we usually keep it around 52 degrees or above. We also have an industrial humidifier. It's not like very humid in the room. We do keep it around 60% humidity. Of course, in the summer, it is quite humid. Everything is quite humid, except for this summer. But generally, we keep it above 60% humidity. Any other questions? All right, I think I'm going to let everyone go at this point. If you have any questions, you can definitely put it in the chat and I'd be more than happy to answer. If you think of something later on, you can always email us. And I really appreciate everyone spending their Friday night with us. And I hope you enjoyed the bats and learned a little something about them as well, and learned to appreciate them.
And we want to thank you for, doing the presentation. It was wonderful, and I'm sure everybody, did enjoy it and learned quite a bit.
Good, I'm happy.
I
Well,
certainly,
Yes, thank you. It was very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Interesting.
Very good.
Excellent.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy your wonderful weekend. It'll be nice this weekend, so get out and enjoy the beautiful weather.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank
all right.
you.
And for everybody else who's on, look for our notices with regard to a October program. I believe the